about this week, and we've got, I think, too many topics. But I heard or I saw an interview between, I think it was the CIO of IBM and Malcolm Gladwell, and and he started talking about AI timelines, and it
Mm.
reminded the good old days of the web when we were like internet years. Remember that whole crazy time where it's like 1 year later, it seemed like you'd
Mm.
gone 10 years. And he said that AI is measured in months or weeks it takes to have a new breakthrough. And maybe it's hyperbole, but I kind of gave
Mm.
it to him because
Mm.
he was saying that because the models are in a sense teaching themselves, and maybe you can fill me in because some of this is a little hazy to me, that because they're training themselves, they get much better fairly quickly. And so a problem they're given 1 week, the model has advanced enough in a week, I guess,
Mm.
to give better answers. I don't know. Do you think he's just selling consulting services or whatever IBM does? I don't know.
Well, yeah. So if we look at where the innovation happens, right? So right now, it looks like generative AI is firmly kind of comfortable with text, right? So you can kind of chat with it, and it can read the websites, and the conversation is pretty well established in that area. So at the forefront of that innovation wave is now multimedia. So we have images that we can interact with, but not quite there. Maybe streams of images or movies, right? Like, hey, you wanna, let's say you wanna feed our conversation, right, into the AI, and the AI will change our faces so that we look like movie stars or something like that, right? So we are not quite there yet, right? But this is probably gonna be happening soon.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe GTP 5 or 6, right? So maybe next year, right? The next wave of LLMs will be able to work more comfortably with that kind of data. I mean, you can still upload some multimedia stuff. You can do Midjourney, and there is a number of other, AI systems in filmmaking that can help with all that. And maybe indirectly, maybe game engines can be hooked up to a large language model. So let's say Unreal Engine can be hooked up to large language model, and that will be producing the Unreal script that will be moving things around in the game. And so we can build a scenario, kind of like a dungeon kind of a text game, right? But the output is going to be basically high resolution, highly rendered, game-like environment, right? So that's probably next year, right?
Sure.
What's beyond that, right? It's kind of an open question.
Well, and one thing that I was thinking, and in his speech, which I can't, I might link to it. I should send it to you. Just the thing was there was a little trepidation, right? Because there's still one of the themes of our conversations is misunderstanding, and a couple of things I thought, even though we both know that there's some pretty spectacular outputs, such as something that's very contextual to you or your problem, that can feel very personalized and very supportive in a way that that Google results never could be, right? That's a very
Mm.
anonymous and a very comes from a different perspective, and so people don't get emotionally attached to it as much as they do when AI says it in a way that is more connected to them, right? Connected
Mhm.
to their inputs, but that's also mimicry, which I kept thinking back to Mechanical Turks for a little while. Remember the days when machines could play chess, but they really didn't play chess. It
Mhm.
just seemed
Yeah.
like
Mm.
they were playing chess. And and to anyone who doesn't know what Mechanical Turks are, forgive
Well, the,
me.
the funny the funny thing with machines playing chess was that probably it was easier to actually have a chess playing program, but it was harder to have a robot encoding so that it picks the pieces from the physical chessboard.
That could be true. Yeah, that's right. Is that you could have a crib sheet,
Yeah.
or as we could both talk about, and I think you had an example about education, and I'd love to know about crib sheets because to me that is more impactful than a cool game we could make or a Hollywood looking movie, because we already know what those look like, right? And we've trained it on what we already have created. And
Mhm.
most people, I think, even now are a little bit um, unimpressed, as
Mhm.
one can say, by anything that a computer could come up with, because we're just inundated with it so much. It isn't considered. It might be cheaper, but cheaper then opens it up to a whole nother group. Like, let's say you could make your $200 million movie for $5,000. Does
Yeah.
that really, is that what we want out
Mhm.
of this technology? Is that why, is cheapness? So anyway, I have a few tangents for you, right? Which is,
Mhm.
one
Well,
is
yeah.
what's, we're still saying, what is the point of this stuff? And I still think we're a long ways off. That's my
Mhm.
point of view. I don't think we have any idea what to do with this technology. Honestly, that's why, bum, I 3, 4, all these things are very arbitrary, because we still
Mhm.
don't know. We don't know what to do with it. But I'll stop, because there's probably too much too much there for you.
Well, I think that, the sci-fi authors, like Philip K. Dick, they pretty well defined what we want to do with those, right? We want to have, Blade Runners and Nexuses, right? Uh, and those super intelligent robots that will be the pinnacle, right? And maybe that's kind of maybe half serious observation, but maybe 50% of it is true, right? Um, and yeah, and
Although
going back to
arbitrarily,
your
that's slavery again. Didn't we get over slavery by now? Right?
well, yeah, maybe, but
or
there is
or
a
the
few.
fact that, do we do things that are that laborious? That's the thing. We have so many conveniences now. I mean, we don't do we need somebody to go pick up the groceries and our kids from school, or a human like thing to do that? That just seems that doesn't seem,
Well,
it seems dystopic. But that's what those authors were all about.
we definitely want to make manufacturing sustainable, and from the financial point of view.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I was gonna say.
So, in other words, people are very expensive. Health insurance is very
Sure.
expensive.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we want to have manufacturing that is super precise, super flexible, all the automation, customization, we want to have that. So how do you do that? I mean, that was kind of one of the reasons maybe for the discussion this week between us, that, there's this company called Hadrian, which is named probably after one of the
I think it's
Roman
a
emperors.
leader of some sort, right? Hadrian.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway.
exactly. So, and what they are doing is they are integrating the manufacturing process.
Okay.
So there's a robot there, that is kind of difficult to integrate with a CNC machine that is making a part. And then there is also a tool that needs to be used, but this tool is wearing out. So you have to kind of look at the tool, if there is a drill, if it kind of wears out. So the tolerances are changing. So you
Hmm.
would like to have a system that can kind of entail all that. And then the educational part comes into play, because to actually have an overview of the whole thing in a current sense, you would have to have somebody that's super experienced in all these areas. So somebody who is a machinist, somebody who is into robotics, somebody who is a programmer, right? So they are basically looking at a problem. Hey, so we may be kind of hiring maybe an intern or somebody that is not going to be a very expensive asset, and we would like this person from day one or then day five to kind of be able to troubleshoot that environment, right? So if the machine stops working, how do I fix it, right? So
Haven't they had something similar to this with HoloLenses and planes? I always think of things like planes being
exactly, yeah,
complicated. That is
yeah,
there anyone that can understand this thing, but maybe an augmented vision? But
yeah.
then we've got Boeing, so apparently it doesn't work. I don't know. I mean,
Well, there was a system called Katia, right? So
mhm.
that basically like a CAD system with a simulation component, so that it was meant to do just that, right? Like you can see on the screen whatever you designed, you can put a person in there, and you will know whether person actually is somebody's hand can reach a bolt that is somewhere in the fuselage of the airplane, right? And if it's not there, it's not reachable, then maybe we should change the design. But it was without the HoloLens and all these nice things. It was just a simulation on screen. So those problems were already formulated like decades ago. But now, okay, how do we actually make this an integration kind of a piece? Like, okay, I designed something that is maybe a kind of designed better from the interactive point of view with humans and maintenance point of view, right? And how do I now kind of build that thing physically, like a cyber physical system problem?
Okay.
Right. So they are
And
integrating
I've
that.
been a little bit in this CAD world, a very
Yeah.
small amount, and I can tell you that every single machine that I dealt with was incredibly idiosyncratic. Meaning,
Yeah.
like you could learn to use one machine, but none of that carried over, especially in the software, right? None of it carried over to another machine. And I was a little surprised because when you talk about, well, the vision that you kind of put out assumes a holisticness that I don't think exists. And I think that's just our human nature, right? We have very idiosyncratic machines. And in business, you're dealing with one right now, right? You have an idiosyncratic machine called a university that most likely operates very differently, even from probably another university in its same system. Unless, of course, you have massive amounts of legislation that makes people adopt something. I assume they all go their separate ways. I know that was true of back in our day at DePaul, right? We tried to make a system, but their system was so rigid and unmalleable. We just decided to copy it every night so that we could change it. And it was a while back, but it still is true. Like you don't get to mess with the plumbing of SAP. Isn't that our long-standing joke? Like you can't, and it was made by some people at some point in time. There were decisions made, right? But nobody around knows why those decisions were made. Probably they don't even know the data models. Speaking of, we were going to talk data models too. But as I said, idiosyncratic doesn't seem to be the best. Is that the best use of AI, right? That it can, I guess it translates well, right? It can say, hey, I know how to change this parameter in this machine, and I know how to change this parameter in this machine.
Well, in the database world, you have this communication language, right? So you have SQL, right? So you know that this relational database, like SAP, for example, is going to be responding to queries written in rather standard, well accepted language. There will be a little bit of maybe 5% of the code is going to be problematic, but 95% of the code is going to work on across all the database systems. Now you don't have that in manufacturing.
The IO code is really pretty good, right? But
Yeah.
the model is not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know. You remember the days, and you probably do this, where they have class names, which is take this variable and use it to determine what you like. Those long class names that literally tell you what this variable does. Whereas data models are usually like varchar date. Like date of what? Like you can't read them that way because they were always kind of weirdly guru-y. Maybe it's changed. You know better than I do. I'm not sure.
So that's why you need generative AI, and that's where the power is, right? Because if you want to describe those varchars and kind of explain what date really means, right, and or what the starting date or end date really means, in your table that has 10,000 columns, then you really either have to hire a legion of people who will understand what they are looking at and then describe whatever is happening. Or you can have the generative AI kind of look at the column name, look at the samples of the content that is in the column, look at the columns across, maybe have some sort of a kind of skeleton idea what the application is. And then amazing things begin to happen because now you start describing what all these things are you can put this into additional data set that is going to be called metadata or whatever, and now
Mm-hmm.
you can have a conversation with your database. So you don't have to touch the database per se. If you want it, right, you can modify that. You can modify column names, right, or you can kind of slap the metadata however you want to do on the column, right? Or you can abstract out your metadata to some sort of an AI architecture that AI can search in real time. But now you are solving the problem, right? And this is transferable to other areas. So now the language of the robot can be handled the same way, or the
Mm.
language of a machine and a manufacturing process can be handled this way. So you basically have an AI that speaks all those foreign languages and can make sense out of this. So now you can have a question, right? Build me a piece that is going to be a cylinder and it has three holes in it, and those holes are supposed to be here and there, and that is power, right? Because you otherwise you have to go into a CAM program, and you have to make sure that it's going to be a correct output for the machine and all that stuff. So that is something that is a game changer.
I still think it's a little harder. At least I was not as good as it as you mentioned, because when we started this out, we were just sort of talking about this um, this idea of kind of high level thing, like make a movie. You see what I mean?
Mm.
And I was reading this fairly good Reddit conversation about this, and they were talking about how they dislike things like Photoshop now because they're trying to do the creative part. And it's like, no,
Mm.
I'm here to do the creative part. I want you to do file management. I want you to do like setups and all these things that nobody likes to do. And I will tell you, setting up milling machines and stuff is really not fun. It's really difficult, but sort of the outcome is fine. You see what I mean?
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense. I just wonder if we're attacking the wrong problem, right? Which is probably more about saving and understanding presets, which is could even go back to what we were saying with the data model, right? It's just a bunch of ideas that someone had at some point, and they start
Mm.
cramming stuff in there over time, nobody remembers why or kind of what they're used for, and some become overly important and overly brittle, right? Like think of we went through Y2K, right? It was just
Yeah,
because we wanted to save a couple bytes.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So
so
yeah.
yeah, to your point, I mean, the audience that needs a manufacturing process is
Mm-hmm.
basically the same audience that needs an entertainment industry to kind of produce certain types of movies. So in the
Okay.
manufacturing process, you have an audience that might be aerospace industry, and that they will have specific requirements in terms of tolerances and materials used and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can translate the same thing into the entertainment industry, right? You have an audience that is expecting a certain type of a movie, and very often they will have various levels of requirements where the technology that is generally speaking, that's producing the movie is maybe over delivering, like to me, right? For example, the rendering, the special effects, we are over delivering in a lot of areas. I mean, there's probably too much stuff there, but then there's going to be other set of requirements that an entertainment industry might deliver on that are higher quality. Like for example, the script. How interesting is the script? Am I gonna know after 5 minutes of the movie how the movie is gonna end? Nowadays, I probably do, because all of this stuff is sequels and all of this stuff is so predictable. Even if you are looking at movies that are based on a novel, it's sometimes you kind of you read the novel, like the Dune saga, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fantastic books. I mean, there is really the script couldn't be better. The movies are great, but if I look at the movie and I
Shogun
look
just
at the
happened to
novel,
be another classic,
yeah,
big novel. But keep going.
yeah, yeah. So you would probably hope that maybe for certain types of an audience, we could over deliver in some areas, and if AI can assist with some of those things, who says there should be one version of a movie? I mean, maybe a game engine should be used to do that, so that maybe we will sacrifice some areas of computer graphics or animation, but we will overall deliver on the script, for example. That's why people play the dungeons, text dungeons,
Mhm.
because the script is there, right? That's the
Sure.
interactive part is very very engaging, and so what I'm trying to say is that now we have a set of tools that perhaps can, to your point, to manage this process better, and maybe it's going to be less of a design by committee, in certain fields of the industry, and more of a kind of design freedom, because we can handle all those incredibly tedious and difficult long processes that require a lot of resources if we use humans, but the AI can handle that.
I think it can. I mean, we both went through this when we started to get some of these thoughts out in the book and surviving AI. And I remember switching very quickly because AI was good. It was certainly good, but it did not have a voice, right? It sort of managed to be just, well, it's as good as its prompt, I suppose, and maybe that's another topic for another day. Um, what what I think is interesting about what you're saying is it sparks to me this. Someone was saying how the first draft could be done by AI, and I think I feel the exact opposite because I did see maybe it was Grammarly or something, but it had a little bunch of check boxes, one of which was remove words that make things less forceful,
Mm,
might, could.
mm,
It's a habitual thing in my own writing. I know that I tend to couch most statements
mm.
in uncertainty. I think that was actually the checkbox. Remove uncertain language.
Yeah.
And while I appreciate that, one wonders, right? One wonders, is that going to be more like then everything's going to be CGI all the time? You see what I mean? Are we going to get overly saturated with a certain style of writing because AI is pretty good at taking away some of the vaguenesses of the way humans like to communicate? I'm not sure. I just feel it's probably like anything that has to do with trends, is it overcompensates after a while, right? You tend to go into everything's going to sound like it was written by a robot, and then everything maybe will sound like it was written by a grade schooler. Where these themes again are something you can't tell Frank Herbert how to write his book. Right, right. I
Mm.
don't know that you could even mimic it, although I think he tried a couple times. Weren't there sequels? But I don't know.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, so definitely, the new novels feel different, right? And those are written by his son, maybe, or somebody from the family, right? But yeah, I totally agree. Although on the other hand, you can you can definitely show the original novel to the AI and ask to write another chapter, and probably that chapter is going to sound exactly like Frank
Mm-hmm.
Herbert. So the speech patterns or the grammar patterns of writing will be exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, it's a tough one, right? I mean,
Well, it's like
it's kind
every
of like
movie's a young Harrison Ford in it if we're not careful. You know what I mean? Because that's just what people are used to. But at the time Herbert wrote this, that was not a trope, right? It wasn't anything that people were recognizing, and that's part of the beauty, I think, of the written language, at least. If probably the cinematic language too, right? Is that you have outliers, and outliers are really kind of what you're in the game for.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of getting now deeper. Like, for example, why Philip K. Dick, for example, is such a writer, that has been accepted for so many, screenplays, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you have Blade Runner, you have many different kind of scripts kind of
Or
in there, on the
darkly,
big in
yeah.
the
I think
yeah
Lisa doesn't, yeah, for sure.
yeah, you have. you have some Tom Cruise movies. I think they're also based on a script
Minority
like.
Report is
Yeah, I
it
mean,
too?
yeah. So these kind of things, yeah. So why is that? I mean, if you read Philip K. Dick, I mean, he is a great writer, but I can probably point out a great deal of other writers that probably can match him. So yes, I don't know. I mean, so this is kind of the intangible, and maybe
I
it's kind
remember
of
the
a
Harry
hidden.
Harrison. I was a Harry Harrison fan, the stainless steel. But
Exactly.
those were
Yeah.
never cinema. They were
Yeah.
never made, but they were so cinematic, which is so odd because
Yeah.
maybe that was it. Like it all had to do with some theme that the directors think they could add something to, and maybe that's why has that black dark mirror. Like apparently they probably can't make dark mirror anymore because they've been right about everything, and, and or something. I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah. Yeah. But again, this problem can be kind of translated into uh, database retrieval, right? So you have a database that has certain personality that you describe with the metadata, right? So
mhm,
it has a certain type of a content, certain semantics. It's about maybe a transaction. It's maybe about a certain product, or maybe it's about maybe it's an educational database, and you're storing course materials in there. Right. So now, you would like to maybe have a conversation with not only with a single lesson, but maybe you have a question now. What do I am? Let's say I'm 18 years old, and I would like to do something interesting in my life.
mhm.
Help me, and you're gonna reach into an educational database of a university, and you would like that question to be answered. Like, what would be a career for me? Right? So you would retrieve the AI can help you with that because it will be aware of all the courses that are being taught at the universities, and it can reach deep into the content, and it can understand that certain things that are maybe more tedious. So if the human being at the other end is a more creative type, then maybe it's gonna suggest something that is going to be maybe related more to computer graphics rather than accounting systems, right?
Mhm.
So you see, so if we can have a conversation with a database, then it can also be kind of like a conversation with a script or reading a novel, right? Like you can reach deep, and you can kind of have a interplay between the personalities of the human asking the AI, and also the AI being influenced by the content it can read. Right. And then, if you want to be trivial, you can give it to the human using Yoda English, right? Or you can use Shakespearean English, or you can, or maybe next year, right? It's going to be a short movie clip. Like here's,
Mhm.
imagine yourself, here in this position, and it's going to show you something that today would probably be done, still manually with the film crew.
Well, education, I would love to get your thoughts on because I think that's where I spend most of my pondering because having or I work for and you've worked for fairly expensive higher education organizations. And if anything that is attractive about the new models, it's that they're cheap, right?
Hmm.
But both know that a lot of material, a lot of really wonderful material has already been made free. I think MIT has been free for at least 20 years. You could probably take
Hmm.
you sit in on any course you want. Does that mean that people do? And is that how they get their education? Or is education I teach graduate school, right? So I don't believe that people really interact with each other that much because I was talking to my daughter that the social connection tended to be the most important reason why people went to a particular school, right? That you devoted time away from the day to day to be in a place. Now that you're remote, now that you don't meet other people, the
Hmm.
value and it's gone up in price in astronomical ways. I wonder if education. I just wonder. I have not. I am in on every particular communication about this topic, and I'm surprised that it really isn't being covered that strenuously. There
Hmm.
are no boot camps for instructors to really understand what this technology means. But I do love it
Mhm.
because it's cheap, because I think that's usually tends to be the biggest arbiter of change. The internet was cheap. It was cheaper than getting a publishing house or subscribing to a newspaper. You know, uh,
Mm.
the internet connection wasn't cheap, but then that became a gateway for all the audio and video ever recorded, kind of thing. See what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it turned into this pipeline, and it's still cheap. I mean, it's still almost every country other than us, it's cheaper, but cheap is good, but not necessarily when it comes to education, right? That
Mm.
it is the difficulty and expense the point of education.
Yeah. Well, it's such a big topic, right?
It's a
Like,
big
yeah,
time.
I'm not sure where to even start, right? So
I
it
don't think
used.
anyone. I'm opening it as a Jack and Mike have no opinion because that the hard. We talk about manufacturing and other parts being helped by this technology. I agree, but those are already they're already honed to a high degree, right? They're
Yeah.
already pretty good. Planes seemingly are manufactured fairly well,
Mm.
along with many other things other than cyber trucks perhaps aren't, but whatever, like we're pretty
So
good at most of those things.
so maybe it's a useful thing to look at the starting point, right? There was always the discussion, like there is very first introductory set of classes. Should those be covered by, full professors with the most amount of experience and possibly, the best teachers? Or should those be covered by teaching assistants? Because those are the simplest things, and the students, really don't need to have a full professor to teach them, like basic stuff, in all the across all areas of science, right? So obviously, there's pros and cons, right? Maybe the full professor will know how to approach the subject and will really instill the kind of the desire to learn more and all those things, right? So maybe that's going to be simply a better experience from all the perspectives, right? But since this professor cannot be at the same place in all the for all the courses, right? Then maybe the most advanced courses will be covered by TAs because already students are very advanced. They don't need that amount of explanation, and graduate students tend to be kind of really kind of to the point, and they will really resonate well with the very advanced public, right? So there is this kind of like question, right? And then now we have also, okay, so maybe the introductory courses should be covered by the AI, right? So that, so it's the simplest material, and you require a lot of amount of repetitions to really kind of like get going, in some areas, right? So in this kind of like more basic repetitive nature, of introductory classes, maybe AI is the perfect fit. And then, we can kind of move the humans towards the later part of the degree program, right? So yeah, I mean, how about that idea, right? Maybe or maybe an AI should be a companion for everybody, right? And it's kind of like there.
Well, and it brings up a really good point about what education is, and I
Mm.
think if I was to give this a twist, it's that the well, for one, at least in my own experience, a professor at one point in your life noticed you and complimented you and said that you were pretty good at something.
Yes.
Okay, me too. Once, not many.
Yes.
But once they did, you probably then changed the way you felt about something, and you might have pursued something that you might not have normally pursued. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is very fair, but let's not forget that people even 20 years ago, people
Hmm?
had a very strong emotional connection with the Pac-Man character in the Pac-Man game, and that was 20 pixels by 20 pixels matrix, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can we can play the same card here, right? Let's say an AI is an avatar that was with me through high school and help me with my courses, and then maybe kind of will be kind of with me when I'm taking those university courses, and maybe I'm going to value and will be emotionally dependent or attached to that AI system, equally strongly, at the same level, maybe as the
Call back
human.
to Neal Stephenson's Diamond Age, because he already wrote that book,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
you would have the companion, that would be, but in his book, the companion was expensive and it was given to somebody who was poor by mistake. So there was still the idea, how cheap is it to have a companion? Which changes, a little bit, because that's what we consider dear, right? That not everyone gets a good education. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a professor or teacher that compliments them and gives them some self-confidence in a topic or whatever. My other twist was going to be that I'm really paid not for the course, but for my feedback. I think feedback loops are the unseen magic of life, right? Like if you just work every day, it is unsatisfying, and sooner or later we all get a yearly evaluation or whatever, and none of it is very effective, and certainly much more effective than at the moment, at the instant feedback that you can get from this avatar, right? You could get feedback. I've just found that they've been prompted to hell and back to be very nice. I'm a little I'm a little suspect. I'd much prefer the paper chase, who is the John Huston character who dislikes everyone's contribution to his class, basically, and is always challenging them. But do you know the reference I make? I can't remember but anyway, he's the prototypical higher education teacher who is stand and deliver, right? Like, tell us how you would argue this case, Mr. Olner, or whatever he used to say. And all the students are terrified. And that's what motivates them. and drives them, that I don't think AIs could do that.
Well, and maybe that's the key thing, right? Because it's really not terribly useful to have, all the free courses, from Harvard and MIT available to you, because it's basically like having a calculus book on the shelf. Unless you open it and go through all the examples and kind of maybe repeat it, do it like 3 times, front to back and, back to front, then really that book is not useful to you at all, right? So,
wait, you need a problem that requires calculus. So how many people have calculus and have never, ever encountered a calculus problem?
Well, yeah, I mean, but there is also a very thin kind of like mathematics is abstract, right? So you might want to have this encounter with the abstraction, right? So there's definitely need of people who would be doing research in advanced mathematics.
In algebra, come on, right. Jack,
right, or whatever, right? So, but whatever the area might be, right? Let's not kind of stay on STEM necessarily, but in all areas of science, right? I mean, if you have a resource that is available to you, you have to kind of get to it, and that motivation aspect maybe is something that is the real kind of like key element here, right? Because it doesn't really matter if you have the book on the subject matter, or you have a course on the subject matter, or even if you're sitting in the classroom and you are not thinking about the subject matter, you are thinking about what's happening outside the window, right? So, but if there is this...
I think you've hit it. I think it's the problems we need to give students, not the curriculum. Give them a problem. Like, have you ever heard the students have to build a roller coaster or something?
Yeah, and the problem has to resonate. It has to be interesting.
Yeah,
right. I want to do it, right? Like, when I was teaching, a lot of times if the material got complicated, they would tell me, hey, I can do it if I want it, but I don't want to do this problem, right? So,
That's right.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so perhaps there is a role here. Like if we can kind of build those maybe TikTok channels that kind of affirm the validity and the interestingness and the kind of make something really exciting, maybe through those whatever channels we choose. Maybe this is going to be the spark that will move the education to higher levels, or however we want to transform it.
To really, I think we might stop here. By the way, this has been good. I want to stop because I love this problem space issue. Actually, I really do think it's more interesting as we look at the techniques by which you can solve problems, right? And
Mm,
obviously, cool image or a movie or a lovely written thing by AI doesn't solve problems. It merely kind of
mm.
pushes you
Yeah,
into solution spaces, let's say. If it could manufacture something, I think we've gone through that a bit.
mm,
I'm thinking of 3D printing was supposed to save us all from something or other, right? But
yeah,
you see what I mean is that instantaneousness that you get is far removed from we're dealing with political, sociological, health. These are some super big problems that I don't know if the Venn diagram is there yet, right? Like
mm.
I think we both might have our own inputs into that, which I think we should save. I think we should save it for next week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we probably can
Problem spaces
continue.
are problem spaces are big in education as
Yeah,
well, and I have dealt with a couple of what do they call it, platforms where people have problems and they're like, here's problems you can use in your class, right? Like, but we can leave that because I'd have to do a little research into this, but it's much easier to get problems at work, but we all know that we're tended not to give them problems at work. We're given tasks to do at work,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and
yeah. I mean,
and somehow the problems might be around somebody's problem, but you're almost never really kind of like looped into what the problem really is.
yeah,
That
yeah. I
so
mean, yeah. We can maybe kind of take apart, the problem formulation, like you said, the Venn diagram for an interesting problem. So let's say my interesting problem would be I would like to be an engineer so that I
mhm.
can get people from our planet to Mars, right?
Okay,
And that's
yeah,
my exciting problem. However,
okay,
chances are that you look at what SpaceX is dealing with. They are dealing with the little tiles that are protecting the spaceship from heat. The heat shield is falling off, right? It's
hmm
so so suddenly this is not a astrophysics problem. This is not astro engineering problem or not rocketry problem. This is basically a welding problem, right? How do I attach a piece of heat shield to a metallic surface, right? So that when it vibrates, doesn't fall off. Is that still interesting to you as an engineer who wants to get people to Mars, or is there something that I can do to formulate the path, to success in, let's say, somebody's career that kind of will still excite me, right? And and
yeah.
and and
Oh,
maybe and maybe that is a harder problem than we think.
agreed. And it even ties back into your sci-fi. Normally, it's we have all this technology, but we still have a problem. But the problem wasn't the one we thought we were solving.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the twist ending of most of them, right?
yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we'll bring that up next week because I want to know what you think about it.
All right. Yeah, sounds great. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And scene. So cool. So I find